one
one nation, under God,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Thank you very much. Welcome. So the first order of business would be approval of the agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes to the agenda?
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second?
I'll second. Sir.
All those in favor?
aye,
Motion
Aye.
passes. General public, is there any general public present that would like to speak? Hearing none, we'll move on. Chris, did you want to move the presentation to the top of the consent agenda?
The proficiency-based, yes.
Okay,
Or the grading task force, yes, that one.
yes,
Yes, that one.
okay. So if that group is ready to present, everyone should have received that Google Slides this afternoon in their email. So whoever's presenting could start.
I think that will be me. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to present my screen, so it should show up in the meeting. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yep.
Great. Okay. So that will help all of us to stay in the same page too. So we have been working on a number of different areas related to proficiency-based grading since our last board meeting. So we wanted to go over those with you tonight, give you an update on our status and recommendations in each section, and also our timeline for work moving forward. So the first area that we'd like to talk about tonight is our transcript. Sorry. So we developed a mock-up of a revised GRCSU transcript, which is linked in that document. I'm going to present it now also. So we worked through a number of different pieces, but the big takeaways for us were that our students need information on a transcript that is a little bit personalized because many of them are using it for different purposes. Some are using it for an application to a work-based learning program or for employment. Others are using it for the college admissions process. Some are using the information on it for scholarship applications. And so we sort of need a wide range of options for students depending upon what their purpose is for sharing this information in this format with an outside audience. So we have been working with Infinite Campus to design a transcript that has optional sections so that the counselors can go through and they can just with a checkbox include information if it is appropriate and helpful to the student for the purpose that the information is being shared. And they cannot include information if it is irrelevant or not something that the student wants to share out in a transcript format. For example, some students choose to share their SAT or ACT scores in a transcript. Others do not, and they do not have to disclose them to some of the schools they're applying to. So having that flexibility. So this is a very, written on mock-up of what the transcript would look like. So adding our scoring key to the top, and this is actually an older version of that. We'll show you the new one a little bit later in the presentation. And then including class size, GPA, and rank, Latin honors, test scores, and academic achievements, including Val-Sal. Again, these would all be optional. So when a student or a program needs and requires them, they would be available. When they don't need to be there or would not be relevant for the student. They don't need to be there. And the same, obviously, their courses would be listed for each year that they've taken them. And then their flexible pathways, any opportunities that they've had for extended learning opportunities, work-based learning, internships, habits of work, again, is optional. Current courses is there, and that most students would want that for most purposes. So most of the transcripts would have that. And then their attendance history, again, optional. That's of high interest, in particular, to a lot of employers. So we want to make sure that we have the capability to generate that information. Let me just switch back to our overview. So we've gone through the, I'm sorry, it keeps advancing here. So we've gone through the new pieces that would be added there, and that it is personalized and able to be modified. The other piece that we've been working really hard on is the data on the back end. As you know, some of our students had, many of our students had different grading systems in different years as we adopted the proficiency-based system. This is, before my time, but many of you have been going through it for a number of years. Where there's
So you're cutting in and out pretty significantly. Whatever you said, we completely
they were freshmen to the term, be able to do that. Oh no, did I cut out?
Yeah, we lost about 30 seconds.
Okay, I'll go back a little, so I apologize if I repeat myself. So the other thing we've been working on really hard is trying to make sure that we have the data to make sure that all of the students, when we present a transcript for them from this graduating class moving forward, that it just has one grading system on it. There were changes to the GRCSU, or at that time, RCSU grading system in different years as they adopted proficiency-based learning long before my time, but many of you have been here. And so the older grading systems are different from the newer ones, and it makes a transcript that has two different keys for two different grading systems on it, which makes it more complicated for admissions counselors and also made it impossible for us to calculate a GPA. So we've been able to go back into the jump rope system and get historic data out of the system. And we're going to now be able to produce a transcript for every child from this year forward that just has one system on it using the conversion table that we'll share with you in a minute when needed. But the jump rope data is actually numerical, so we don't even have to convert what's already in there for the students who are here. So we've been going through that. We've been just trying to be really careful and thorough because obviously the accuracy of that information is incredibly important for every student. So we just want to make sure that we have scores that are truly just around academic achievement, and that we're able to do that. We have one of the schools has been pulled out, and we're working with the tech department to get the other one. And then we'll be putting them into Infinite Campus, running mock transcripts, and making sure that the data is accurate and that we've been able to verify it. The advantages of us having a consistent transcript like the one that we're presenting, it certainly streamlines the process. Right now, the counselors are doing many things manually and having to create a whole separate document that has additional information beyond what's in Infinite Campus. So for consistency, for accuracy, and having an automated way to pull that data and generate a report, we think that having this transcript program in Infinite Campus is definitely the way to go. It could also make it more timely. Again, you don't have to wait for someone to manually create something. You just click the buttons, check the check boxes, and print a transcript. We like that it's customized to the student and that it really does meet their needs for this information. It will also provide more information for admissions counselors, scholarship applications, employers, whoever needs that. In addition, it's a permanent storage of student information. Right now, some of that information is captured in Infinite Campus and some of it isn't. So, if you have a student who comes back to you 10 years from now and needs information on a transcript for a certain purpose and that counselor has changed at that time, some things like their flexible pathways and their honors, we want to make sure that those are captured in our data system and can be reproduced at any time that a child might need that information. And this kind of transcript program would also benefit any student who needs it. Any school would be able to use Infinite Campus to generate a transcript. So for our schools that have choice, like Rutland Town and the Wells Springs schools, they could also choose to do this for their graduates who are applying to other programs if they wanted to use this, this system. Right now, the programming for Infinite Campus for this transcript is not in our Infinite Campus module. There's a cost associated with developing this kind of transcript feature. And there's a cost estimate that is linked in this document also that we sent to everybody. That Infinite Campus had worked with us. So we met with the Infinite Campus staff and developers and went over exactly what we wanted in each area of the transcript and how we wanted it programmed for that personalization. And then they put together this very lengthy document that outlines the kind of back-end programming that they would need to do to make that happen. The last page, I believe, is the page where it outlines the hours and the cost that they think would be associated with this, which they're estimating at $10,400 to develop this module that we could then use, again, in any situation in any school.
So I'm not sure about everyone else, but the links that you sent did not open for where you have them hyperlink for transcript, mock-up, cost estimate. None of those links did not, I could not open those. So I have none of that information.
I don't know why they're a PDF with open sharing. Was that people had to?
Yeah, same. This is Kristen Ross. Same. I was trying to. I could tell that they were supposed to link. So, but I didn't. It didn't work for some reason. So I don't know if there's something with the way the PDF generated them or.
I don't know. I apologize for that. We can certainly send them out in a separate document to everyone.
Hello?
So that, maybe I'll just stop there for a second and ask if there are specific questions around the transcript piece. We haven't gotten to the implementation timeline for it yet, but any specific questions about anything that I just said?
Is the cost built around just time or is it built around number of students?
It's just built around development time. They estimate the number of hours basically that it will take their developers to do the work, and they use a per hour rate. So they're estimating approximately 52 hours of time at $200 an hour.
Do other schools currently, Rutland Town and Wells Springs, create a transcript for choice students?
Rutland Town does. They have one that their administration has been creating manually.
I don't know as we do at Wells Springs for the people that go. That my question would be is, does Mill River and Rutland City use the same Infinite Campus program?
I don't know the answer to that, Clarence. I think most of the districts that are our size or larger have an automated transcript program. They're not doing it by hand. They have some kind of system that automatically generates it, whether it's Infinite Campus or another information system. It's very rare to do that many transcripts by hand. I know like Pulteney was looking at their 7th grade classes, 50 kids or something, and, looking ahead to think about tracking manually information for that many students when their, course grades are changing and honors are changing and you have to keep updating it. That's just a really large personnel investment of time. I know in the Wellspring schools, when students are applying for choice schools, the school staff have to pull together quite a bit of information. They're photocopying report cards and printing off test scores and gathering a whole bunch of information for the students' applications for any of the programs that require an admissions application. But most of them, they're not producing a transcript. They're copying or producing information that's already available at this time.
So what does it mean when you say optional on the transcript? Are those bullet points on every transcript? And if you don't want the information, it's left blank? Or does optional mean that bullet point doesn't exist on the transcript if you choose not to have it?
That's the way that we would like it programmed, and are working with them to try and make sure, like, we don't want a heading to show up and then be blank, because we don't think that looks good for a student. We think it makes people ask the question, why is this blank? So we're trying to get it programmed so that if we click no, then the heading doesn't show up and the information doesn't show up. So it's just not a part of that child's transcript.
So since the high school transcripts belong to Quarry Valley, is this presentation coming to Quarry Valley? Because it sounds as if you're asking them to create a module where you can create a transcript within Infinite Campus. But within that transcript, it can have various options. It seems like that decision and that discussion should happen at Quarry Valley.
Well, we want it to be a consistent transcript across GRCSU, given that Rutland Town School definitely is also going to need to use this feature, and that, of course, many of the Wellspring students go to our schools, so it will end up benefiting them eventually. But we'd like to make sure that we have a consistent transcript platform across Rutland Town and Quarry Valley. Obviously, financially, we would not want two different approaches to this. So we really felt like it would be a supervisory union transcript for any student in our supervisory union.
Yeah, a high school transcript is going to look very different from an 8th grade transcript. So whatever the modules are that you're asking them to create, the add-ins for a high school senior is very different from an 8th grader.
The high school students are definitely using more of the modules because 8th graders haven't had that opportunity yet to take advantage of some of those things. But some of that is changing. We've had 8th graders who have participated in VTVLC courses at Rutland Town and have taken some accelerated coursework beyond the Rutland Town programming that would get recorded in a flexible pathways module. And same with attendance. For those students, attendance would be more often required for a high school to look at their records than some of the high school students. So they would still use some of those modules.
I guess the request from this board was about grading, and the request from Quarry Valley was about transcripts. So I think it would be beneficial to have the transcript conversation. Maybe you have it at each board. It's very personal. It's something that we've spoken about. We had talked about in the past that we wanted the grading to have unification across the SU. I think
yes, there's more in this presentation around that.
I understand that. I think there are several things about the transcript that need to be still vetted out, but okay. Any other
Yeah.
questions?
Hey, this is Matt. Lisa, can you hear me?
I can. Hi, Matt.
Hi there. I was just curious with like a timeline of events, like where are we? It seemed like I was just reading the presentation, and it's that we're going to a 1 to 4 grading scale, and that I believe it's Poultney is going to be adopting that in the next year. Was that, where did that come from? I wasn't sure that that was the direction. Like, yes, we're doing the 1 to 4 scale. This is what I thought. That's what we were having a discussion about, continuing that. Poultney was outside of it. Has there been anything further there that I don't know about, or?
No, I think we're gonna talk about that in more detail in just a few minutes in this presentation. So I could go into
Okay,
that a little
thank
bit
you.
more at that time if you don't mind. I think we
Okay,
tried
yeah,
to
thank you.
explain things in a kind of order so that they would build on each other and make sense to folks at the end.
Okay, perfect. And it's just for clarity, my questions weren't at the transcript. I haven't gotten up to the high school level, and obviously I'm a board member at a K through 8 school. So that was less important to us, obviously, than it is to other schools like Corey Valley and Poultney. So thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to move to our next section of work that we've been doing. So in order to create a GPA for the transcripts, we needed to go back and look at the data in Jump Rope. And one of the things that became very clear in those conversations is that with the different grading systems that are being used in different schools, not only in our state, but all over the country, when you talked about sharing grading information with both college admissions counselors or employers, but also with families, which I know has been a big topic of conversation at our meetings. It's very challenging to do that if people don't really understand your scale in a historical context. And with proficiency-based learning and grading, we're asking people to reconceptualize student progress in a very different way. And it's hard to just do that out of thin air and expect people to make those leaps on their own. We really need to build a bridge for people from the historical grading practices that people are familiar with to the proficiency-based grading systems that are the ones that are espoused in the education quality standards and are the focus of the work in this Vermont schools at this time. And so we've created this conversion table in order to be able to do that. And I'm gonna pull it up. And again, I'm sorry that these links didn't work for you guys. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So what we did here was we took our standards-based grading, the labels, the words that had been used in the past of exceeding proficiency, meeting proficiency, approaching proficiency, and below proficiency. And we created this conversion table so that people can see what that means in the 4-point grading system that we're using in 7 out of 8 of our schools, but also in the systems they're more familiar with, like percentage grade and letter grade. And so people who aren't as familiar with the 4-point scale or don't really understand the 4-point scale or don't really understand the language can look at this in a comparative way and sort of see what that would mean for students in a more historical grading system. So the top just gives kind of the big buckets of that work, the broader categories. And then the bottom of this chart really breaks it down into, 3.7 is equivalent to a 95, exceeding proficiency or an A to A plus. 3.1 would be equivalent to around an 83, meeting proficiency in that B to A minus range. A 2.4 would be equivalent to a 71, approaching proficiency in that C minus to B minus range. And anything 1.9 or below proficiency would be in that 64 and below range for folks. And we color coded this to match the levels in Jump Rope right now, just for ease of use for families, because that's what they're able to see in terms of their student scores, to help them go through and make sense of this information in a way. And this is the kind of thing that we would be able to provide to families when we're sharing any kind of report out on student progress, so that they're able to use it to make sense of that information. And then we could also provide it to colleges, universities, employers, anyone who needs it, to be able to make sense of our grading system and determine, using whatever metrics they need, where our students would fall in eligibility. This, we hope, is going to answer the question for families of, how is my child doing and what is a 2.4? Is that okay or not? Should I be worried about my kid? And we also, we had this reviewed by a college admissions officer, and we've compared it to sample conversion tables from a variety of other schools, systems, and professional organizations around proficiency-based grading. So we know we're lined up with the field and the conversion tables that are being presented by lots of other organizations and school systems. So questions about the conversion table?
Eyes to see that a B is an 80. I mean, last time I knew that was a B minus, not 79, a B minus. I know this doesn't really align with what you're trying to achieve here, but I'm kind of surprised there.
Yeah, and everybody's grading scales are a little bit different. So that's why we really looked at, what other folks using proficiency-based grading were using for this work. In particular, because that B category falls in meeting, and anything below there falls in approaching, and that was where that cutoff line was. So this is the universally applied scale in most of the proficiency-based models that we've looked at, or comparative with it within a few points.
Does this color chart currently exist in Jump Rope?
It would be the color of the bars that you see on the side in Jump Rope when you're looking right next to the scores for students.
Right. I'm asking, does the color blue exist in Jump Rope currently?
Yes. Yeah.
Not in Proctor, it doesn't.
Oh, well, that's what we
I'm looking at Jump Rope right now, and several that should be in blue and everything's in green. So I've never seen blue on Jump Rope.
I'll have to look at that. That was what we took this from, was the Jump Rope color code. Any other questions on the conversion scale for now? And obviously we can go back to any of these things later on. Okay. So the board had asked us to come with a proposal for a grading system plan. And this is, I think, what Matt was referring to earlier. And this is our proposal, is to maintain the 1 through 4 scale for 7 of our 8 GRCSU schools who are already using the 4-point scale. We have one school that is not, so we would want to transition that school onto the 4-point scale by the fall of next year. And we'd also like to get all of our schools onto the same reporting platform, so that everybody is using the same system. Right now, that is Jump Rope. And you'll see in our timeline, we continue to look at platforms. There are pros and cons of Jump Rope. Some things we like, some things we really don't. So we continue to look at the market and see if there's anything better out there that's been developed for proficiency-based grading. But it would either be getting everybody onto the same platform, whatever that platform is, by next fall. We have some plans for working on that at the Professional Development Day in March, in June, and in August of next year. We have piloting already occurring of Jump Rope, and Jump Rope is available for all staff when whenever people are ready. Jump Rope also has just released a 2.0 version, which is supposed to have significant improvements in ease of use over the original system. That we're doing training with staff on during the in-service next week, so that anybody who is currently using Jump Rope or who wants to start using Jump Rope can use the 2.0 version. And we're still learning about that and playing around with the features to find out exactly what it is that they think is better in this version. We believe that this scale score system aligns with the proficiency-based state requirement, that it focuses on learning as a continuum over time from that novice to expert continuum, and that it separates academic progress from behavior, which we think is really important in being fair to students about the different parts of their growth and reporting on them separately, so that they get, again, their best foot forward in as many situations as possible. We also think that the conversion table is going to be a really important tool in keeping this grading system plan. We feel like no matter what grading system we use, there are pros and cons, there are flaws, there are things that are better or worse about them, but that having that kind of consistency of understanding for families and making sure that our teachers have that consistency as well. When we get to our rollout plan, we'll talk a little bit more about that, but we know that calibration from teacher to teacher, classroom to classroom, that's important in any grading system. And we definitely have some work that we need to do in that area. Questions about the grading system plan?
Lisa, this is Kristen Ross. I just have a quick question about transitioning your second bullet point there, the Poultney High School to by the fall 2021. Is that going to incur an additional cost to do that, or is that just something because we're already paying for the Jump Rope in the system anyway that there isn't an added cost?
Yeah, no, there should be no additional cost for that. We have Jump Rope licenses. They do system-wide licenses and licensing costs, so there won't be any increase in that cost.
Okay, thanks.
Just training time, for the staff that we already have, the coaches and the teachers, but within our faculty meeting, PLC and PD time, and within the coaches' day, we think that we can just get that training done within our normal professional time. We don't think that we'll even need additional release time to do that. We think we can just do it in the time that's already available.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Other questions about the grading system plan?
Hey, Lisa, this is Matt. If you could do me a favor, I'm just looking for like an email with everything. The only thing I was able to get was just the plan, and I was a little thrown off by it with the grading system and just the changes. That's all I was able to see. So I'm going to need to take some time and process it. I think we're definitely making some steps in the right direction. But I need to process that. So if I can get an email with everything, and then maybe speak to some other board members, but I'd be curious to hear what everybody else's thoughts are. Because it really looks like the 4-point scale is what we're moving to, and we're trying to come up with a way to let the public know. And then it looks like we're also trying to tackle transcripts. That's something I don't know much about, but I'm really deferring to, I guess, Lisa and other schools that are dealing with that, because I'm hearing that an awful lot in the community, that both issues need to be dealt with. But thank you.
Okay, I'll keep going. And again, we can come back to any part that we need. So I talked a little bit about this before, but we think that this family communication piece is really critical with the 4-point scale, and making sure that people really understand what we're talking about, and how is my child doing? Are they on track? How can I best support them? Where might they need extra help? where are they excelling, where we can either celebrate or provide additional challenge for them. We want to make sure that those things are happening. So the communication pieces, we think we need to do a lot more and a lot better job, frankly, with this kind of work. So we're looking at things like making sure that there's a brochure that goes home around grade reporting time, that there are quick videos on the website that have walkthroughs of, understanding your child's score report and what that means, and that we're able to include more regular and better information to families to understand and interpret this grading system. So like, here's a draft just as a quick example for you of like a trifold brochure that we would look at sending out to families. And it's just a draft, it's a working draft, but just to give you a sense of the kind of tools that we're looking at. And I included a few that we've been looking at and using as resources and models from some of the other districts around us. There's a sample from Rutland City, and I'll make sure that all of these get sent out again as well, so that you can take a look at them. But they're doing some very, very similar things and trying to make it much clearer and easier for families to understand the grading scale, what proficiency-based grading is, why are we using it, how is it different than what we've done in the past, how does it impact students? And there are a few different tools that we have looked at for generating that. Some of these guides are very quick, like a trifold brochure. Others are a little bit more in depth. I'm going to share a sample from Harwood in a second. And they have, it's a 10-page document that really goes in more depth on proficiency-based learning. And it would be nice to have multiple kinds of communication pieces for families, because everybody understands information and wants information in a different format. So having something more in depth for people who want the more in depth, having a brochure for people who just want the quick glance, having a video for people who prefer to hear it rather than read it, and trying to make it really easy for our families to understand this. So again, just a sample of some of the things that might be included in that kind of document. Like, what do scores mean and how does that work? So there's just some great samples out there that people have put together, and we're really trying to make sure that our district has those same kind of resources for people, and they don't have to work so hard to understand their child's progress. So getting to our timeline. So in terms of a transcript, I guess the first thing would be to decide which board, in fact, is going to make a decision, or which boards, and what that process would be like. And then decide if the board supports an investment of funding at that level for transcript creation, which fiscal year the board would like to try to create funding if they choose to do so in that area. Just so you have a sense of timeline, if the board chose to implement Infinite Campus transcript for this year, there's a 6 to 8 week development time with Infinite Campus. It takes that long from the time you sign a contract to the time that you can finish and can have a working module in Infinite Campus. That's their lead time right now. And then there's some setup time, just making sure that everything is in there, all the data gets inputted and is verified and very carefully vetted to make sure that it's accurate and right. If we said yes tonight, the timeline would be tight but possible for fall applications. 11/1 is the Common App deadline. And then in January, most of the schools look for mid-year reports from admissions. So we would definitely have something ready for that. As obviously, if we delay that decision-making process, then these timelines would move out, and this year's fall application cycle would not be in the running, but we might be eligible for the mid-year, the January report, or next year, if that was the choice. For the conversion table, we're planning to share that with our staff once school is open and share it with our families at the first reporting period. Be able to, I'm so sorry. Visit faculty meetings upon request, and anywhere that teachers or staff or principals feel like we need more conversation around it and more deliberation around it. And then if we need to do follow-up at the October professional day, then we could work in some time to have a larger group conversation at that time with our team. For the grading system plan, to roll that out, we really want to go do building-based meetings and trainings. The southern schools in particular, to move them toward that jump rope implementation, and also to make sure that everybody understands what we're doing. So having some faculty meeting time and POP meeting time, workshops during our PD days in October, March, and June. The calibration, this is really where the rubber starts to hit the road, and the work that we need to do becomes more complex, but also more critical. We know that we have some work to do. This is curriculum-wise and aligning our proficiencies. We took 2 sets of proficiencies from 2 supervisory unions for PBGR's proficiency-based graduation requirements, and we kind of smushed them together in the year before I took this position. And some of the groups were successful and came up with a united set of proficiency-based graduation requirements that are based on the Common Core and aligned with the Vermont proficiency-based graduation requirements, and really cut to the heart of their discipline and both the content and skills that need to be done. And some groups did not get to that point. Some groups still have Northern and Southern proficiency sets that they're working on, and we need to continue that work, because if we're not teaching the same things, then trying to grade the same things certainly isn't going to happen and work well. And then there's work that needs to be done with that. So if we say that this is the proficiency that we're teaching to, then how do you assess students' performance against that proficiency? Do you have a performance task that all students need to do so that you have a common assessment that you can use? Do you have a proficiency scale that all teachers use to grade that performance assessment to determine whether or not the child has met proficiency? You really need to have those kinds of tools and those kind of conversations with teachers to make sure that what's happening across our supervisory union is consistent for the experience of students. That takes a lot of time. That's not currently built into our professional development schedule for the year. And we need to figure out coverage. And as you know, staffing right now is tricky for us. So we just have to have a plan for that. And right now, we don't. We have to make one and figure out how we're going to get these teachers together and when to do this work in a year where we really need folks in the buildings and working with kids. But we know that that's work that we've got to do, and we know we have to make time for it. We just have to figure out how. For transferable skills, which we've called habits of work in most of our schools in the past, right now, the schools all have different sets of habits of work, and transferable skills are required for proficiency-based graduation requirements and the educational quality standards for Vermont. So we are supposed to be assessing students' progress toward them and reporting out to families at the very least. It doesn't necessarily have to go on our transcript, but it is beneficial to some students when it's on the transcript if they have excellent habits of work. So that's why we put it as optional. But in any case, we need a common set that everyone in our district is teaching to, and that we have a way to assess student progress for them. So we already have names of teachers from different schools to serve on a task force to work on this and to develop a common set, get feedback from the SU, and then develop the assessment tools that we need and to calibrate that work. Longer term, graduation requirements from credits to proficiencies is one of the other important steps. This is really this big shift in proficiency-based learning from seat time to competence, and is part of the whole goal of the state in this movement, that showing up and sitting in the chair for the entire class doesn't necessarily mean that you're proficient and that you can demonstrate proficiency in the core concepts and skills of that discipline. But you also might be able to demonstrate proficiency in 3 days in another format. So why do you need to, you don't need to sit in that chair for the next semester. You need to go be doing something else that is enriching and challenging for you, and that personalization piece. But this is a longer term conversation that's going to need to be had, so that people can get there in a thoughtful way, and not just let's change the system and then figure out how we're going to do it. Let's first figure out how we're going to do it and then change the system, with lots of feedback from people along the way. For athletic eligibility, obviously that's tied to grading system and all these things. We know that there's a process underway for having a consistent athletic eligibility determination across the high schools in particular. And then just would need to revisit that as needed. So if and when something in this system might have an impact on that, we would need to come back to it again. And then that exploration of reporting platforms that we talked about, making sure that jump rope is still the very best tool on the market to do what it is that we want to do and share the information that we want to share on student progress. So that's our timeline. So what are your questions, and is there anywhere that you'd like to go back to?
This is Clarence. When you refer to southern schools, are you talking about Wells and Middletown?
Wells, Middletown, Poultney Elementary, and Poultney High School.
Southwest.
Yes.
Okay.
So I would not be in favor of approving the transcript piece tonight. We didn't receive all the information in the packet. I think it's a bigger conversation than the SU board. I think it needs to go to Corey Valley for conversation. I would be curious to know how you are calculating the GPA. I have asked multiple times, and I think there are, if you go on Infinite Campus, they're calculating it. I see one of the problem with both platforms, particularly as a parent, that you can't go back and look at your students' classes or grades, that they aren't on either platform. So that's problematic. I think when I look at Infinite Campus, I'm a little bit surprised of all the things that Infinite Campus can do that are not being currently taking advantage of. So $10,000 is a lot of money right now for this year, and looking into next year, I think that's a bigger conversation than making this the decision tonight. Before the brochure goes out about the grades, I think it would be nice if it was sent to the board for preview so that the board knows what is being sent out. Because when things like that go out, it gives the impression that the board has approved these items. And I in particular don't like things popping up without us knowing it. Questions, comments, thoughts?
This is Kristen Ross. Lisa Miser, I agree with your, I am not familiar with either Jump Rope or Infinite Campus since I don't have an older child yet in the system, but yeah, it would be great to just get the links, and maybe you can just relook at the PDF or something and send that tonight, but have a little bit of time to go through those. And then yes, I would, being able to see that brochure or whatever the kind of communications are, would be great if we can, have, even if we can get that before a particular meeting date, at least to get some, you could ask for some feedback before, in between meetings, I guess is my point. So that would be really helpful. But, and I also agree with that, the cost, I'm not saying that it's not worth it. It's just this is, again, a really sticky year. There's always sticky years, but this is stickier. And yeah, so that's something where I think at the district level too, we should talk about those things.
And I'd like to also mention, I mean, I appreciate there is time crunches. You guys have a lot of work, but getting a document like this in the afternoon before a meeting, especially when it didn't have links, even if it had links, we wouldn't have had the time to spend with it that we all really need. So we really need to see this before the afternoon. Unfortunately, we have other jobs and don't have time to just say, oh, wow, look at that. I need to spend an hour with this before the meeting starts so I'm prepared. And I even tried to do that and then I couldn't do anything with it. So I'd really appreciate a little sooner getting that information to us before a meeting like this.
I guess I'd also like to see an actual mock-up of what the transcript would look like. What you showed us tonight, I mean, it's pretty sloppy and messy looking. And that's been one of the concerns about transcripts, about having it have a clean, concise look that is putting our students at the top of the pile. So at a future meeting, if to discuss or vote on this, I would think that Infinite Campus would provide you with what an actual transcript would look like. And I would like to see that rather than just something that's been mocked up by the committee.
I guess from my point of view, I'd like Meredith, I'd like to see it a little sooner, but for the most part, K-6 school, the transcript piece isn't going to be that imperative because we don't have a vehicle to track all the secondary students, even though we're paying tuition to keep those up to date. I see nothing wrong with us having the K-6 transcript that's accurate and fair and fine. So I think we could go along with that program, but it's not going to be the same as everybody else. Their transcript is going to come from some other function. That's why I was interested in seeing if the majority of our students go to Mill River right now, or at Long Trail's a close second, and I don't know if either of them use anything like this, so that stuff could easily be reported to us, so we would have it. If it's not, then this question does get to be a Quarry Valley question about the product that they need for their needs, and it's not as imperative as the grading system. Yes, that's very important to all our grades. I agree with that, but the transcript piece is probably much more in tune to Quarry Valley. Maybe does Long Trail, they have a transcript their own that's available and out, Meredith?
But they're actually really relying on a placement test too. And quite honestly, I don't think Mill River really cares either. They're going to take the kids in and find out where they are. So it's just a different scene at the elementary level, K through 8. But I wanted to say, as a GRCSU board member, I do feel a certain vested interest in making the right decision for the board, even if it doesn't directly affect our district specifically. So like I said, we need to see a lot more here. Not being able to click on the links and just having the presentation is not enough information for me.
Comments from Rutland Town about the grading system? I know that was your avenue of interest.
No, this is Matt again. I'll just say I was a little thrown off by it and everything I was reading. Now I'm on the page, so I just need to get the information and get a chance to look it over and see exactly, what's being proposed. The only thing that I would add until we get to that point is just to say I thought we should know what the surrounding districts were doing. And, I just kind of presumed that we knew what Rutland City's system was, what their grading system was. And the other thing that I asked was that, did we hear from Greg too? But it looks like we got a little more time. And we'll be looking at this again. But Greg was going to talk about what the limitations were of each. But again, we'll get to that. It sounds like maybe next month. But I really need to see the information and process it at this point. Thank you.
The only thing I have to say, we've come a long way, and I thank you for all the hard work. It's got to see a little bit more, but definitely, I think we're working where the parents are going to be able to tell where their children are and what their strengths and weaknesses are. Transcripts, like I said, for 8th graders aren't as important, and yet they are kind of gets the parents in tune to what they should be looking at through high school, especially if they're going to look at college prep and stuff like that. But just a little more work. But yeah, I think we've come a long way from last time we talked about this.
Anyone else? Eric, Tim?
Yeah, I just want to say there's still a lot of good information here, Lisa, and as far as the transcript part of it, I think it's a good idea to use, have a tool that with the optional segments for the transcript. Of course, that's going to go to Quarry Valley and maybe come back here after more information, but I still think that's a good idea. The only concern I would have is that if you have them program this for you, that if later on down the line there were things that should have been added or weren't there, is that going to cost more to add or implement? So, but other than that, I'm thinking that from Wellspring's point of view, I think we talked about going to jump rope a couple of years ago. That still in the works, never happened. So I guess that would be this first step. But overall, this is definitely a good start and more information than what we had a month ago. So thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
No, this is Matt. I just wanted to add too. Tonight brought up the point. We discussed this for a long time at Rutland Town. I want to say it's been a few years now. It then carried over to the start of GRCSU, and at the same time, I'm kind of recognizing tonight. But thank you, Lisa, for getting this out and starting that conversation as I emailed to you. But anyway, I'm realizing tonight that a lot of schools are wrestling with these programs that they don't even have. And to me, it was just about, we're used to jump rope after a few years. We've been working for it, but we thought it was going to be beneficial to get it up to this level. And I think it is for everybody to see. It would make sense that all 8 schools be on the same system, the high schools be grading the same. But then there's some people that aren't familiar with the program. So this was definitely a good discussion. I'm just not sure, and I'll turn it over to Lisa. It's definitely a local issue. And it seems extremely important to me that all 8 schools get together and on the same page as well. And it seems that some other schools are obviously really far apart. Obviously, Pulteney's over at the completely different scale. So, Lisa, where do you think that this discussion is best left in the future? Back down at the local boards or up here on this level?
Which Lisa are you talking to?
I was going to ask that too.
Sorry, and that was Lisa Meiser.
So I think the grading component is important. We've talked about this before, that we're all grading. All schools are using the same system. However, I guess with the conversion table, it's possible if a school wanted to use a different method of grading, it seems like that would be within their purview. particularly with the scale. I think that's a personal kind of a district issue if that's the way you want to go. Transcripts, I think that are really a high school issue, and this is a conversation that began in Corey Valley about transcripts, and I would like to take it back there and at least have the discussion and have the information. We're 3 high schools coming together, and even voting and having, let's say, a common transcript, each school is going to have different features on that transcript just due to the uniqueness of each school. So I think those are things that need to be discussed at the district level. I don't know, grades. For us, Poultney is coming and moving to the 4-point scale with us. It just makes sense, particularly since we're sharing teachers and doing classes and things like that. We're also, this will be the last year of kids in West Rutland and Proctor that will transition transcripts out of having letter grades, I believe, on their transcripts. So going forward, it will be numerical. So I think that'll be easier. But
isn't there a significant issue in terms of the teacher's evaluation at the elementary level by using what we've been doing at Middletown and Wells, and maybe Poultney Elementary as well? I felt like there was a distinct advantage for really seeing where kids were as elementary students, which is, I get it. It's a different thing for the high schoolers, but I feel like we've never had an issue with this.
are you talking about transcripts or grades?
The 4-point
Grades.
Yeah. I mean, currently most of our schools in this old SU are at numerical. So the difference would be, as I think Lisa said, were the southern schools transitioning to that. So I would.
Yeah, that's what I meant in terms of not just transitioning, but the effectiveness of providing better, for lack of a better word, teaching to the elementary school kids, because you're really evaluating them in a specific needs basis. And I think this is what Lisa Madison we've talked about, and you went through this as a principal. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Just to clarify a little bit. So 7 of our 8 schools are doing standards-based grading, where there's an individual standard or indicator, which we now call proficiencies, but we've had lots of names for them over the years. And each of those is scored so that families and students have a high level of detail about how they're performing. And 7 out of 8 of our schools are currently using a 1 to 4 scale to report on those proficiency levels. So for many of those schools, they've been using this system for years and years and years, and are some are very happy with it and feel like it's providing great information on kids. Others, I think, feel like they still need more information to help families really be involved and active advocates for their students and their education, and that we also need to make sure that we have a scale where students are able to achieve at all levels. And the other concern that we've heard is that there are a lot of students getting 2s and 3s, but there are not very many students getting 4s, and that is really a challenge in our teaching practice for differentiating for the high end and the students who are ready for more challenge, and that we need to work on that and making sure that that is just happening in our classrooms on a more consistent basis. But that's not necessarily a problem with the grading system. It's more a problem with the way that we're implementing it in the classroom.
Have you looked at, I know we had problem in Rutland Town with the way teachers were using the grading system. You may have teachers in the same grade grading differently, or it can go from a grade to grade. I mean, they weren't consistent. What 2 might mean to one teacher is different than what it means to another teacher. Have we strengthened that at all or straightened it out?
Yeah, that's what we're talking about in the calibration work that we know we need to do with the proficiency scales and performance tasks and getting the teachers. When we say calibration, what we mean is that when teachers are grading for 2s, a 2 looks the same from here to here to here to here. And when teachers are grading for 2.5, a 2.5 looks the same from here to here to here. And there's lots of ways that we do that with teachers. Looking at student work is one of the more familiar kinds of professional development approaches. But we really need to spend time with teachers where they are working with colleagues and scoring work together using common proficiency scales, or rubrics is the term you might be more familiar with, so that they're all using the same tool to grade the same assignment, and then having those conversations when they disagree on scores and making sure that they start to norm and really develop a common understanding of what that should look like. And things like standardized proficiency scales or rubrics and standardized performance tasks where all 3rd graders do the same activity at the same point in their curriculum, so that teachers can really see where are they against the proficiency and they can share those scores and work together. Those are the types of tools and resources that we have yet to develop as an SU that are really going to help with that calibration and getting people to have much more consistent scores and grades from classroom to classroom.
And that's the one you said that you haven't figured out a timeline on yet, correct?
Well, I haven't figured out how to get the teachers out of the building when kids are there to do that kind of work, or how to get time with them outside the school day to do that kind of work. We're going to have 3 professional days. We have 1 day in October, 1 day in March, and 1 and maybe a half in June, to do all of the things that we need to do with our teachers, including a lot of focus on the reopening piece that they're doing this year. And I just don't see that being enough time. So we have to figure out how we're going to do that.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, to me, all the other work you've done is fantastic. And like Matt said, I know we've been a pain in the butt because we've been yelling for about 5 years. But if the teachers aren't on the same page, then we're still kind of giving out false information to some of the parents, because we're not all grading the same. So to me, that's even more important, that whether the child is a 2 all the way along, that the concept is better. I mean, some of these parents are really from year to year surprised at how their child either exceeded beyond their hopes or have gotten a lot worse than what they thought. That's just a little disturbing to me.
Yeah. Lisa and this is Chris, just jump in real quick. You're 100% correct, but I also just want to note that that's not an issue just lies solely with proficiency-based grading. That's just a grading issue. My 27 years in education, I think we back in 93, we were having this discussion about what is a B, and as you look at 4 or 5 English teachers, what a B looks like to each and every one of them might be something different. So I think whether it be a letter grade, 100-point scale, proficiency-based grade, I think that the calibration is very important, because there is going to be that human error, that's the interpretation of just as move from individual to individual. So it's something which we do have to do a better job. But I just want to make sure that as people hear this, they don't think that's a problem that just solely linked to proficiency-based grading. That is just a grading problem. So no matter which grading scale we choose, that calibration is a very important part of the process, so we make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of what this looks like in each of our classrooms.
Yeah, I understand. I think maybe just because it's, meets, exceeds, and is below, because we've narrowed it down to 3 categories, maybe it sticks out more now. I'm not sure, but that's, kind of concerning. But I understand what you're saying, Chris. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, are there any other questions, comments from anyone? All right, I think we've shared kind of what we're looking for as a board, or to go to different boards. And if that information can be shared out and questions responded to, that would be great at a future meeting. If the information can be shared out right away, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Lisa Miser, this is Kristen Ross. Before we move on, I just want to make sure I have everybody because some people are on the phone that I think I don't either. I might have, or they switched from being video to phone. So I just want to make sure I have everybody in terms of attendance.
Sure.
So if the person on the phone whose last two digits are 83, could just tell me who you are. Are you not on anymore? I was writing these down as they jumped up, but well, there's an 83 there. Last two digits, 83. How about 76? Phone number, last two digits, 76.
If you're on the phone with those numbers, can you please identify yourselves?
Hi, Alyssa Hutchins.
And which one are you? Sorry, Alyssa.
7-6.
76. Got it. Thank you. How about?
And I just don't know how to unmute myself again.
I know it's not as obvious on the
7-6
phone.
left. It
How about
says 7-6.
09? The last two digits, 09. Can you please let me know who you are? You're muted right now.
Taylor Sherman.
Taylor, was that your name? Taylor Sherman?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Phone with the last two digits, 51. You're also muted. If you can just tell me who you are. You're muted. You can figure out how to unmute yourself.
This is Marisa Keyfaber.
Marissa, can you spell your last name?
Kief as in Frank, A-B as in boy, E-R.
Thank you. And did I get 83 yet? Well, 83 and 64, if whoever those phone numbers are could just let me know.
Well, I think the one that said she was 7-6 was actually 64. 7-6 just joined again. So if your the last two digits are 7-6, can you please identify yourself for the record?
Well, I'm still missing 83 and either 76 or 64, whichever it was. So
All right, it's disappointing people will not identify themselves for the record as per the open meeting law.
well, maybe the phone, I think is it *6 to mute and unmute? Is that what it is? Maybe they just don't know that. Or they walked away from their phone.
All right, moving on to the minutes of July 22nd, 2020. A motion would be in order to approve the minutes.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Oh, I'm 7-6. This is Katie Crowley. Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to unmute myself.
Thank you, Katie.
Motion by Eric, second.
I'll second it.
Second by Lynette. All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Hi.
Motion passes. Everyone received warrants in their email. Questions should have been directed to Lewis if there were questions. So a motion would be in order to approve the warrants number 138 and 136.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Motion passes. Chris, superintendent's report.
Yep. Before I begin, can I just ask anybody who's on the call just to mute themselves, please? Thank you. I'll do that actually. So if you wouldn't mind, I wouldn't mind just kind of combining the school reopening update along with the superintendent's report, kind of one the same. So I spoke at length with each of our board meetings this past month about the school reopening, and this past month really just about getting things ready to go. And in the past couple weeks, we've had the building principals have done a great job working with their teachers, the task force, just making sure everything's ready to go. We really, there's not a lot much else. Now it's just getting the staff back in the building. And we have the new teacher orientation, which began today, which will continue tomorrow. The teachers will be in for a flex day on the 28th. And then next week from 31st to the 4th, have a week's worth of PD, which Lisa and her coaches have put together a good week of just learning, which will be centered around just the learning models that we'll be using in the variety of the remote learning, the hybrid model, or in person to best support them. A lot of tech support, around the cameras that could be used in the classrooms, the microphones, the laptops that some teachers will be receiving. But also give an opportunity for our building administrators to work on the procedural and operational plans with them to review what things are going to look like in the building. Whether it be just a review of the security drills, which have been slightly altered this year just to accommodate for COVID-19, but look at how we're going to move kids throughout the hallway, have kids safely enter the building, exit the building, a variety of capacities. We also, the past week or so, myself, Lisa, Madison, and Lewis have met with Kelly's substitutes. We recognize that staffing, as with every year, is always a concern. We have people who are out for a variety of reasons. That finding a substitute is problematic. And so what we're looking to do is, at least for the month of September, is to provide each building with a building-based sub to assist with if there are people who are out, as well as to assist if there are any sort of duties or the health screens or anything else that we might need just to go through. So that provides a bit of relief. We've been searching through add School Spring. We've done stuff on Facebook. We've looked at front porch forums. We've done a variety of ways. We've had a good amount of interest. And that's in addition to also having Kelly's assist us with, if someone calls out, that Kelly's will still be supporting us with building-based subs as well. And really that's about it for right now. Like I said, outside of all the other things I've discussed, just get ready to open the year. I know we pushed things back to the 8th. To be honest, I kind of wish things would have started just now, because I just want to get kids back in the building. I want to see how everything goes and just get the year started. So are there any questions that people may have for me?
Chris, this is Kristen. It's a follow-up from, I think I asked this at Corey Valley.
Mm-hmm.
Have we had a plan or finalized a plan or thought any more about busing in terms of needing other staff or changing anything about how busing is working?
In speaking of the building administrators, we do not need additional staff for busing. And I think building administrators all have a plan for busing at their respective schools.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay.
Good luck.
Thanks.
After being back at Castleton for a week, we already have, loads of issues. So, and we're not even, we're online. So.
All
Thanks.
right, thank you. Lisa Matson. Is she still here or she left?
Sorry, my computer's taking a minute to process things. I'm still here. You have my written report. And again, other than the work that I presented tonight, we're primarily working on reopening full speed ahead and trying to generate a gigantic amount of resources, training, and support for teachers coming back to new teaching challenges and new opportunities for the year. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Lisa?
Lisa, this is Kristen Ross. I had a question about your very last bullet point, just kind of a just interest and inquiry, I guess, about any more specific. I know, again, reopening is sort of front and center everywhere, but in terms of looking at anti-racism initiatives and equity initiatives, I think we're going to talk about the equity policy, model policy. How do you vision that sort of moving forward, maybe in another couple months, I guess, once the building's open again and we can get in a routine?
Yeah, absolutely. I think preliminarily what Chris and I have really been working the most on is allowing and creating opportunities for staff to both process the events happening in the larger world, especially in our country at this time, and to begin their own sort of self-assessment and reflection in this area. We had some staff members who were interested in starting book clubs this summer, which we wholeheartedly supported. I was able to participate in, where they, with groups of colleagues, chose texts related to this topic, and self-facilitated these groups, just great discussion groups, where they really got to explore the text and their own experiences and perspectives and how it relates to the implications for their teaching practice. There are a group of staff who were interested in organizing a committee to begin sort of more formally working on this work at the district level. And again, Chris and I have been able to support them in that and say, yes, absolutely. Like, we know this is work that we need to do, and we're grateful for your volunteer time and attention to that. So they've just had a few meetings over the summer, and they're getting ready to do a brief presentation at in-service where they just let other staff know that that's happening if they didn't already hear about it, and kind of get their feedback and input, or if they're interested in being part of that committee and work. I know Chris is really committed to equity policy, and starting with the big picture framework for the work that we need to do. And we've been gathering sample policies from other districts and starting to look at what a model policy might look like that we could bring forward to the board. And then, we have a lot of work beyond that to start with. So we do have lots of professional development resources available to our teachers already. We have since the spring. There were modules available to them over the summer related to equity work for educators. Again, really focused on that self-exploration as a first step, and trying to identify both our own implicit bias and also things that we may not even be aware of on a systemic level, that we want to make sure that we become aware of and intentionally work on. So, and then there's lots of resources for teachers on our wakelet around talking with kids when they bring up things that they've seen on the news or heard with their families, and how to have supportive conversations with them that don't unintentionally reproduce biases or feelings of uncomfortableness when talking about race. Like it's a bad thing to talk about, and trying to help kids feel like it's okay to have those questions and to talk about those things, and it's okay to not have the answers to, but they're definitely hearing the news. And as you know from Corey Valley, some of our students are really starting to advocate. So some teachers, especially at the older grade levels, have to have some support for themselves around how can they support students who are struggling through this and trying to find their own way and their own voice and their own footing, and how to do that in a way that empowers them, and also provides them with, information and context to resources from external agencies and things like that that can help them in their journey. So lots of little things starting to trickle and bubble through our district, but still a lot of work ahead of us.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to check in and hope that they're teachers and other staff have the resources they feel like they need and support in order to take. These are all uncomfortable topics, so there's going to be a lot of discomfort, as there should be. And so, it's difficult to talk about at the kindergarten level to the high school level. So this is something that's important to me personally. So I'll probably check in a lot on this topic. So thank you.
Have we thought about doing student book clubs across the SU district to district? All second graders read X, or the teacher reads that to them. And since we're using technology so much that on Wednesdays they all group chat and talk about it, something like that. So you're peer to peer. It's great. I think that the teachers have the support and have all of the resources. What I'm looking for personally is that to translate a little more into the classroom.
Yeah, and we do not have, an articulated plan or consistent strategies that we've adopted as a district. Obviously, you guys would hear about those long before we launch them anywhere else. So, no, we have not gotten to the level of articulating particular strategies like whole group reads or grade level reads or any of those specific classroom-based interventions and programs that we would want to put in place. That's part of what needs to come.
But literacy is a big piece across all districts that we struggle with. It seems like that is an easy place, if there is an easy place to start, and that literacy is a great place to start communication and have conversations, particularly with younger kids. I'll ask this question when we meet for Quarry Valley. I am always dismayed when this plan is not adopted. I don't think it's a big plan. I don't think it's a big think out plan. I think it's reading books and talking to kids about the world. And so, all right.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I was just going to say, Lisa, I know you've heard Chris talk about equity audits and equity visits and the kind of thing that we hope to start doing in that regard. And classroom libraries and school libraries are definitely a big part of that work also, and looking at the materials that we have available to students and making sure that they actually represent the perspectives and stories that we want to make sure students have access to. So I know that that's a big part of the equity audit piece that Chris has been talking about and planning on moving forward with.
Okay, great. All right, moving on to personnel resignations. You have in your packet resignations from July and June, and a retirement from June. So a motion would be in order to accept those. Rebecca Vinn, Robin Wright, Erica Osh for resignations, and the retirement is Nancy Jarlsik.
Move to accept with reservations or with regret.
Regret. Second.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, the second page, I'm guessing on the Excel spreadsheet, is simply for information, as those are more district-based. Contract recommendations for support staff, extracurricular. The last piece of that will be a executive session conversation. So we would be looking to approve support staff. Are these new hires, Lewis?
I'm opening up the document now.
Okay.
Yeah, Lisa, it's Christine. A lot of those are some para positions, IA positions, so those are new hires at the top.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure they weren't part of the bottom and somehow got separated.
Yeah, the top two sections are new hires.
Okay. So we would be looking for a motion for support staff, which would be John Carlson, who was Middletown para, Todd Montana, Polteny Elementary para, Lindsay Etchson, West Rutland para, Sarah Dukey, Wells Village para, and Melissa Slinker, Rutland Town para. And extracurricular would be Beth Coughlin for mentor coordinator. Are there
So
any
moved.
questions? Eric makes the motion to approve. Second.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Lynn. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Open positions. I think that's really for information, unless that's something you wanted to discuss, Chris, or that's just for information.
That's for information. There's nothing to discuss
New
right now.
discuss. Okay.
They're all, Chris, they're all still open, those vacancies that you sent us?
No, some of them we just hired in the last couple days. Correct?
Yeah.
I don't have
Yes.
it open. But we just filled
Yes.
some of those.
That's good. That's good news, because
Yes. Yeah. There's some of these that have
Yeah.
not been updated, but I know that the past 2 days we hired a music teacher at Polteny High School and a music teacher at Polteny Elementary School. So, and I know that the part-time school in West Rutland was addressed.
All right.
And
Lewis,
Chris, are we all, if I could ask Chris real quick, are we all set in Rutland Town?
Yes.
Okay, we just didn't hear definitively whether it was accepted or not. Thank you.
Oh yeah. I apologize for that. Yep. We're all good. As of right now, yes.
Thank you.
I don't mean to scare
tomorrow's
you,
a
but
different day.
I go hour to hour nowadays.
Yeah. All right. Lewis, financial update.
All right. Good evening, everyone. So included in the packet was my financial update for the end of year. Included is a summary for the general fund, a summary for special ed fund, and then the following reports after that. There's a disallowed summary, and then there's a detailed printout of the revenues and expenses for the SU. So by now, all of you should have received at your local boards the status of your local district year-end amounts. I think the only exception is IRA, who has not had a meeting yet this month. So the SU general fund ended the year with a surplus of $57,923. This is no surprise. This is about where we were expecting to end the year. The main reason is that we had that one unfilled position of the grant writer, which was a savings of about $60,000. We know we had savings in the superintendent position last year due to having a part-time superintendent, but that was offset mostly by the payout for the previous superintendent. All of the other payments, we extended the superintendent's contract last year to include more days. That's all included in this. So I think ending the year with a surplus is great. That surplus is currently sitting on the books, so the board can make the decision how to handle that. Do they want to refund that in FY21, refund that in the FY22 budget, or just keep it as a rolling balance? And we can have that discussion in a few minutes after we finish going through these. So some other highlights just to mention. Also on the summary report, you can see how that refund would affect each of your local districts, and that would be based on the FY20 assessment. So IRA's portion would be $1,292. Rutland Town would be approximately $16,000. Corey Valley almost $32,000, and Wells Springs almost $8,700. So those are the amounts that would be refunded if we decided to refund that money, and depending on what year we decided to give it in, the amounts wouldn't change. So we also ended the year with 3 fund balances, the Medicaid funds. We use Medicaid funds to fund a portion of our administrative positions that are funded. It's the remainder of the positions that are funded with grants. So like some of the special ed positions, our curriculum position. So majority of those positions are funded with grant funds, and then there's a small portion that is not funded with grant funds that we use Medicaid for. We also finished the year with a MAC grant balance of about $98,000. That is a grant that we use to fund our tutors, our Girls on the Run, and some other small initiatives that we run, and those change from year to year. And we've had this surplus for a while that's been carried forward, and we've been trying to spend it. It's really, we're really limited in what we can use the money for with the MAC grant. And we've been trying to spend that down over the last few years, but due to one reason or another, we have not been successful. And then the wellness fund is just something that's been carried forward from Rutland Southwest. It's about $877, and we've used that to promote wellness throughout the SU with several different programs. So that's the general fund. Moving on to the special ed fund. So we ended the year with a surplus in the special ed fund of about $125,000. And that surplus has already been refunded to the districts. So the year-end balances that you saw at your local districts did include that refund. I included the amounts of the refunds below at the bottom of that page. And the main reason for the refund for the special ed fund, there was 2 main reasons. One is that we had disallowable amounts that were above our estimates. And we did talk about the disallowed amounts at each of the local board meetings. We'll talk about it a little bit more in a few minutes, a summary, an SU summary. But those are the main causes. That is one of the main cause that we had a refund at the SU level. The other reason is due to school closure, we had savings in Kelly services and changes in IEPs, as well as some savings in contracted services for our tuition students because of changes in IEPs to distance learning plans. So that covers special ed. And Christine, if there's anything you want to add, let me talk a little bit about disallowed, and then if you want to jump in with anything you want to add on special ed.
Okay, thanks, Louis.
So the disallowed, again, we talked about this at all local board meetings, but what you're seeing here in front of you is an SU summary. So I provided the position types, what we budgeted for disallowed amount in FY20, what the average disallowed was, and what the variance is based both in percentages and dollar amounts. So in FY20, we did not budget any amounts for disallowed for special ed teachers. We did realize during our FY21 budget process that we most likely needed to put some money there. So in FY21, we did budget 5%. So FY21 is the year we're in right now. We do have 5% budgeted for this year. As we look at FY22 budgets, we may need to tweak that number a little bit. I know we're trying both to make changes at the school level to use our staff less for regular ed activities so we can bring those percentages down. But we'll talk more during the budget process whether we want to be a little bit more conservative and increase that amount. For paras, we budgeted 15%. And the SU-wide amount came in at 20%. We did keep FY21 budget at 15% also, so we're 5% over on this. For special ed teachers and paras, mainly for teachers, I mean, when we look at why these staff members are putting in disallowed time, for teachers, it's mainly the duties that are part of the master agreement. So right now, all teachers have 3 duties. Duties are a regular ed expense. They're not based on an IEP. So anytime that teachers spend doing duties, it would be counted as disallowed. And then there's also any other time that they're working with regular ed students, whether it's during school, before students arrive, after they arrive, stuff like that. For paras, they're doing duties throughout the day. It's not part of the master agreement. It's just part of their schedules. So based on what the schedules that are being created by the building principals, as well as special ed administration, if there's regular ed time, that would be adding to that disallowed amount. And this greatly varies by para. You could have some paras at 0% and then some paras at 20, 30, 40%, based on building, based on para. And at the district level, boards did see those percentages based on a per para basis. So we went right down to the employee to show you. We didn't show names, but we did show each employee and what their percentage was. SLPs, OTs, and PTs, these are related service providers. These numbers should be pretty small, and they are. We didn't budget anything for these in FY20 or FY21, so looking at FY22, we may want to budget a little bit. Some of these are for duties, some of these are for working with regular ed kids. And then contracted services, this is mostly Rutland Mental Health. Actually, I think it's all Rutland Mental Health. So we have contracts with Rutland Mental Health to provide behavioralists for some of our students, and these are based on IEPs, and we had several different situations where even though they were in the buildings to work with special ed students, they also worked with regular ed students, so that amount becomes disallowed. And then we also had one situation where a student came off an IEP, and the administrator decided it was best for that student to keep that staff member with that student, and so that now switched over to a regular ed expense and then became a bill back, and so that amount was disallowed. So the total disallowed, that was the variance, was $228,000. That all got billed back to districts. So that resulted in an increase in expense at the local level, but a decrease in expense at the SU level. All right, so Christine, is there anything you want to add both about the special ed budget and disallowed?
I think, yeah, just a quick, like, even when Louis, like when you were talking about the Medicaid and the part that, is for particularly the administration and the school psychologist, we are in part in Medicaid because anything we do that's not special ed related, such as working with 504 students, handling that, the homeless, anytime they're doing that, none of that can be billed to special ed, which also just brings that piece of how, anytime a para or a special educator, they are doing things that are not special ed allowable, we have to bill it to gen ed. Work closely with the principals to let them know when those things come up, what we can and cannot bill. I'm hoping this year what we did was for all the special educators, their contract is set up specifically for the hours of the school day. So if they're doing duties in the morning or after school or whatever, the building administrators will do an individual contract, extra duty contract with those. So that'll be much cleaner, that you as the board too will get to see what's happening with that and know those expenses beforehand, which I think is helpful. And I think, whenever they're pulling staff and they're feeling they need it for gen ed duties, I encourage, let the board know when you're doing that so that you're aware of what these expenses are and what's going to be coming your way. But I think that's all, unless there's any questions.
Okay, any questions from the board on either the general fund or the special ed fund? Okay.
Louis, sorry, this is Kristen. Just to clarify for me, so what we'll need to think about is, as a board, is changing those percentages, ticking them up a little bit higher, at least for some of the positions. Is that for FY22?
Correct. So when we start the budget process at the SU level, we'll have those discussions We can look at it both at an SU level and a district level. It
Yeah.
is easier to have that discussion at the SU level just because they're all SU employees. And just for consistency, it'd be easier to have that percentage all as one percentage. But we have the ability to budget it down to the employee and to do it based on a district level.
Right. Because I think sometimes, Kristen, it's Christine, sometimes I think, we know we need people to cover morning duty, afternoon duty, lunches, all those things. So sometimes just having it figured out that, basically we're going to have the cost of 2, say, gen ed paras for the year that need to cover those types of things. And that if that's in your local budget, then it's not coming back to you at the end.
Yeah, perfect. That's what I was trying to, get my head ready for budget season.
Yeah.
Thinking about how can we talk about it in, October rather than in June or whatever. So yeah, thank you.
So we can talk tonight about what we want to do with that general fund surplus. We do not have to make any decisions tonight. We could even table it to table the discussion until we start budget process, which for the SU will be, we'll probably start having those discussions in September, and we'll look at the first draft in October. Whatever the pleasure of the board is.
Lisa, I'd move that we refund these to the local boards.
Is that a motion, Clarence?
Yes.
In FY21 or FY22?
This year, current year.
Do you have any comments about that, Louis?
No, I'm fine with whatever the board decides.
Okay. Is there a
Clarence.
second to Clarence's vote?
Sorry, I want to make sure I get the motion correctly here. So Clarence, could you just repeat what you're moving?
Refund in this current year, the SU surplus.
Got it. Thank you.
Second.
Second by Jim. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Did you have anything else, Louis?
Just going to give you a quick update on COVID financials.
Okay.
So we ended the year, we had approximately $20,000 in COVID-related expenses. So what I've done is I've built a receivable for those expenses, and we're waiting on the application from the state. That application process was released yesterday. So in the process, what the process consists of is that we have to give them an estimate of what we're spending, and they'll create a grant agreement. And then after the grant agreement is created and approved, then they'll send. Then we have to send supporting documentation in order to get reimbursed. So as I said, only $20,000 in expenses for FY20. That's mostly because after school closure, we really didn't add any major items. It was just a matter of we had some money for food transportation. We had some expenses for food supplies, not food, but the material, the packing materials, and then we had some like small purchases for toner and remote type work expenses. So looking at FY21, that's where a majority of our COVID related expenses are going to come in. So far to date, we've spent a little over $200,000 in COVID related expenses, most of which is technology, Chromebooks, laptops, cameras, camera stands. And then at the local levels, it's PPE, hand sanitizers, plexiglass, tents for outdoor classrooms, thermometers, lots of stuff like that. So like I said, we have a little over 200,000 spent to date. We probably have about another $100,000 in outstanding POs that have not been paid. And some of those outstanding POs are for some of the items I just listed, as well as there's also POs for HVAC work in some of the schools through that Efficiency Vermont. All of the money that I just mentioned so far is money that we should receive reimbursement for at 100% with no ed fund impact. And I would anticipate that we're going to see another maybe $200,000 in expenses. That's just a ballpark guesstimate, just to be conservative. That doesn't include any major staffing expense. It's just related to supplies at the local levels for technology and PPE, stuff for social distancing, and stuff to make sure that the students are safe and have the tools that they need to learn and for instruction. And teachers and staff members have the tools that they need so that they could do instruction. Any questions on that?
Sounds
Louis,
good.
Sorry, Louis, this is Kristen. Just to, I'm not going to rehash every single thing. I'll listen to the recording, but the state application process you said was released yesterday, and so it sounds like we tell them what we spent, and then they make a grant with those things in it in terms of the RFP kind of a thing.
Yeah, pretty much. So there's, as I talked about at previous meetings, there's all these different buckets that the state has created. Right. With different sources of funds, and they work a little bit differently, but sort of the same. So like there's the food service money for the summer food. That application was actually released a couple weeks ago. I've already submitted that. And what they'll do is they'll take the application to create a grant agreement. And once the grant agreement is finalized and approved, then we can submit receipts and supporting documentation to get reimbursed. And then for the other funds, like the Efficiency Vermont, that actually grant agreement has not been finalized yet. And then there's the other CRF money, which is where a bulk of our expenses are going to fall. That's the one that was released yesterday. So I haven't started the process yet. I think the deadline is September 2nd. So I have to come up with a good guesstimate of what I think our total expenses are going to be. We're not held to that amount, but we need to kind of estimate what they're going to be, and then they'll create a grant agreement, and then we can start submitting receipts and documentation to get reimbursed. And then the last bucket, which I haven't really talked about, is what it's called the ESSER money, and that money works a little bit differently. It works similar to like our title grant monies. We've already received that allocation. It's $446,000 in additional funds. That money is sitting in our grants management system. We won't begin to look at how we're going to spend that until later on in this year. And the reason for that is that the CRF money, we only have until December to spend. So we want to spend that money first. The ESSER money, which is the $446,000, we have until September of 2020. 2021 to spend. So we have a lot more time to spend that money. So we will work on spending that money after the CRF has passed its deadline.
Okay, thanks so much.
Okay, thank you, Louis. At least you came with a little good news.
It's rare, but it happens.
I know. That's why I'm acknowledging you for that. All right, so we already discussed the school reopening update under old business. Did anyone else have any other old business? If not, moving on to new business. Lisa discussed the report on grading task force. So the second piece is the new equity policies.
So this, I do not believe was in the packet.
It was
don't
not.
know why it was sent. So I actually sent out an email to everyone. I have no problem just kind of quickly talking about this, and we can shelve this conversation to the next meeting anyways. But the policy that was sent to you via email was the one that I asked to be included in this package. It's a sample policy from the VSBA. And really what we're asking the board to do is just commit to an equity policy that it basically just commits the SU to doing the following things. I just jotted down some notes, but just asking us to create and foster an inclusive environment in which all students and staff members will feel safe and welcome, entering and working in and learning in our schools. Provide an environment that celebrates diversity, creativity, promotes inclusion and integrity, as well as developing a partnership with our families, board members, and our other stakeholders to obviously help our students be successful as they move forward in their career paths. But also, the important thing too is it outlines a set of expectations for board level, district administrators, school level, and begins to chart a path for the work that needs to be done. And I know that obviously with current events, obviously just with Kurt and Kenosha and the things that happened last spring, there are a lot of feelings and emotions in the world around us. And so what we need them to do is, I apologize, my daughter just barged in on me. So what we really need to do is, let me start that over. So we'll outline a set of expectations for the board level, for the district administrators, on the school level. Just allows us to create better policies, better procedural things that to address programs within our schools. Take a look at I said from an equity standpoint, do equity audits where we look at curricular, we look at systemic issues, we look at policies that might be in place. I know we always discuss like dress code policies, but there are a variety of things that we can do a better job of. And so this one document, this one policy, then kind of propels us or commits us to moving this forward. And I know that Kristen had asked earlier about what sort of things are we looking to do. I know that there's a group of teachers that are already starting to meet to kind of discuss these policies, but we would also like to formally form a committee, which would then be look at the things that we can do on a small level, but as well as on larger level, and start to look at developing an equity plan for the SU. And that's kind of where I look at this policy and what would move us forward with that. So.
Yeah, that sounds great. I know in Quarry Valley that some teachers have already reached out to students about joining their committee also. So I think it's certainly the right step. So if we should put it on the agenda for the next, are we just adopting it here at the SU, or we're adopting it at each board and then bringing it to the SU?
Well, I do believe it will be an SU, but I think within each board, things will look a little bit differently. I think that's one of the things that will, so I bring it to the SU because it will be an SU, but we will go, I'll be speaking with Rutland Town, Wells, Quarry Valley as well about this because I think it is something that's important that we all commit to moving forward with this policy. So
if we just place it on the agenda for the next meeting and make sure it's in everyone's packet.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Hey Chris.
Yes, sir.
I asked earlier this month about, but is there actually a GRCSU policy committee?
I reached out to Judy about this, and I asked some other people, and there are remnants of the policy committee. So what I'd like to do is kind of reconvene that policy committee in September, looking at the members that were involved in that, because I do think it's important for us to have that committee, which takes a look at current policies and future policies, and just make some suggestions and helps us move forward with that. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, that's one of the most important things that we can do, and I don't.
So each local board should have representatives when they do reorganization. So it should just be going back to that March meeting if people don't know who's on that board or that committee.
Yes, and like I said, that would be something when in September, once we get the schools reopened, things that's one. It's on my list of things to get the policy committee back together again and start moving forward with that. So thanks, Eric.
Great. All right. Is there anything else? So the next meeting is September 23rd, and it will also be a virtual meeting. A motion would be in order at this time to move into executive session for contracts. And so we need board members, Lewis, Chris, And that would be it. We can excuse everyone else.
Okay.
I'll move to go into executive session for contract.
Second?
I'll second it.
All right. Now, everyone should have received a link, a second link in your email for executive session. So you need to sign out of this meeting and move into the next link for executive session. Okay?